Many years ago, when it was just being released, I started reading a manga because it had some really cool visuals, but due to life circumstances, I stopped and forgot about it. This story was the Hunters Guild Red Hood, but the other day I remembered it. And to my surprise, it was already too late and the manga had already been cancelled. In this type of genre, you usually expect a relatively long work with lots and lots of chapters. And if it had been the case of taking an axe from the publisher, like what often happens, it would have been at least more than 18 chapters, huh? How do a story that I remembered having a really interesting beginning, a very good premise, that was really appreciated at first, with its great potential and pedigree, with the author having been an assistant in Boku no Hero Academia simply, poof, gone in just a few chapters, and practically everyone finding it pretty mediocre. Yeah, making manga stories is more difficult than just drawing your cool idea. Red Hood's sad fate is a frustratingly complex case with a simple answer. If you want an example for the phrase, it had potential, yeah, there is no other work more perfect for it. This story is so frustrating. Go, play the intro. What do you think a success story consists of? Everyone will say something different, because everyone has different tastes. But every great story you like out there can only exist if it has a solid foundation underneath. The more complex the story, the better this foundation has to be. In most cases, this foundation is the hardest part of developing a story. How many authors have you seen out there who finished a famous story and were unable to develop another one at the same level? The world is already full of stories of every type of taste, theme, and personality, and within this, each one has a different specific basis. It's already complicated to create a strong base. You also have to make it interesting and eye-catching, something that will catch the eyes of those who would possibly be interested, and then attract a new reader. This problem is what led to Red Hood's sad fate, but not because its base is bad, quite the opposite. The base of Red Hood is extremely solid and very interesting, initially following a boy named Vero in a small village that is being tormented by werewolves. The boy had been taken by the kind mayor after losing his parents, the same mayor who sold practically everything he had to be able to hire a hunter from the Hunters Guild to finally deal with the werewolves that had already devoured all the villagers capable of fighting. And if that continues, in just a short time, everyone would have been devoured. And that's when Grimm appears, the hunter sent by the guild to deal with the problem. At first, she looks like any other child, but then, poof, the mayor must be a millionaire, because not only did he hire one of the best hunters in the guild, but she also becomes a character with one of the best designs there is when she transforms. And the story moves from there. When we say that Red Hood has potential, we mean that the basis of the story is very good, interesting central idea, and a perfect atmosphere, with well-constructed ambience, complemented by drawings and designs that are simply beautiful, and comparable to the quality of Horikoshi's drawings, sometimes even better than the beginning art of Boku no Hero. Alright, from then on, it's all good. The author has already done everything that is extremely difficult in the best way possible. If he just maintained the same quality and developed the unfolding of the story, and great, Red Hood would be one of the best stories to be published. But that's when Red Hood stumbles very badly and rolls down the abyss, and there's no ground to hold it anymore. A miss so big that neither its foundation nor its perfect art style, or anything that made the story fantastic, can handle the weight. A story that created the universe in the coolest way possible and told everything, as if it were a 4-year-old child who thinks broccoli is a mini tree and clouds are made of cotton candy. Yeah. The worst of all, and what's most frustrating, is that the potential of everything exists right there in front of you, but is taken away little by little in an exponentially gradual way. It's not something that you can point out and say what the main problem is. It's as if the story started like a ripe fruit, and throughout the telling, it rots without you identifying exactly why. At each fork of the story's progress, the work loses quality, and the more and more choices are made, the more your feeling of, it could have been better another way, grows, and your enjoyment, which at first didn't care much because everything else around was really good, halfway through the story you start to lose interest because everything around has already been replaced by mediocrity. And the brilliance that once existed in those pages no longer exists. The author constantly focuses on things that are not beneficial to the story, and leaves out interesting stuff and ideas presented. It's an obsession of trying to make the story more complex than it should be, and that makes everything that is happening seem cheap. Trying to make crazy plans to show how good and intelligent the characters are, but if you think about for 2 seconds, you realize that nothing makes sense and everything is very silly, and the author is just trying to make you believe that something extremely simple is actually very complex and complicated, where the aim is to create a situation that, if it weren't Vero, everything will go to shit, to make what's happening more atmospheric and such. But either you already know what's going to happen because it's something very stupid and obvious, or it's something that no one in the whole world would have the possibility to know because no one knows what's going on inside the head of the author, and what's the answer he wants that to have. But with the transcendent magic without any basis, one of the characters know. Unfortunately, you notice this a lot, and it's not engaging. The attempt to make an atmosphere and create conflicts has the opposite effect. It makes the atmosphere be forgotten, and the conflicts seem like kindergarten scuffles. Everything happens very conveniently. All the characters do things the author needs to have the story keep moving. They don't have their own choices, and their personalities disappear after the introduction scene. Everyone helps each other out too easily. They just have to breathe and everything will be resolved and the story will move forward. You don't even need to say please. The characters don't move the story. The author uses the characters to move the story that they are not part of. And the terrible feeling of seeing something that could have been better if it was approached differently, without trying to do so many crazy things at the same time, stays engraved in your head when you read it. Fantastic ideas of a beautiful world, wasted on a story that doesn't do what is given. An immense lack of focus. We can talk all day here about the author's failures in developing Red Hood, but it's not entirely his fault. The current manga industry is a depressing environment for new authors. It's not enough to have a good drawing, it's not enough to have an interesting premise, it's not enough to have a well-known name, be an assistant of a famous story or anything like that. In a competitive and saturated market like this, the moment you miss a small point, a target is painted on your back, and if you give in to the pressure, the trigger is pulled without thinking twice. When you receive the news that your story is going to be forgotten in the purgatory of time, and that you have to finish it in X number of chapters for them to remove the rubbish from their magazine, what do you do? What motivation do you have to make this ending that you don't want to make, of a story that you thought would be the work of your life, but because of everything that has been happening at the publishing company, and because of something you did, your trust in it no longer exists, but according to contractual lines, you have to do it. It has to end. There are signs of its final plot ever since the beginning of the story, even though perhaps that was another idea being formed. We will never know the real meaning of the author's intention. But to use this opportunity to criticize the entire industry and have they themselves publish their own criticism, it's certainly a very audacious idea, and that's what the author did. Whether or not this was the plot that Red Hood had from the beginning of its development, or whether it was a response to the cancellation, it certainly transformed the story from an innocent plot that can't even make a complex plan to develop the characters, in a work that tries to expose the difficulties of the manga market, the intense and insane expectation of something created by someone, millions of public eyes looking over a person's shoulder, and the anguish of all the weight placed on their only opportunity to pay the household bills and tomorrow's dinner. Red Hood was a work created with love, fantastic drawing skills, and world building ideas. However, for various reasons, Its development was not what it should have been when you take into account the quality and dedication shown in its premise and in the one shot that gave the opportunity for this story. Author's fault, publisher's fault, naivety, lack of experience. Yeah, who knows what the reason for this huge failure is. From all of this, we can only get one answer. We all live this unfortunate fate sad. They hung a sensational story in front of us, a story that had the potential to make our minds fly and immerse ourselves in the fantastic world of mystical creatures. What would it be like to be a hunter in the guild? What would it be like to deal with werewolves and other rarities around the world, and infinite other things? But then, it was taken from us, never to be seen again. An immense set of problems, and a series of misadventures that disappeared with an expectation of obvious potential. In the end, we all continue to walk and look for stories that resonate with us, that would perhaps scratch the itch of the potential that Red Hood demonstrated. This manga's journey serves as a cautionary tale that even the most promising concepts can falter without strong execution. A once great fable lost its focus and now crumbles in the sands of time. And there won't be a muscular girl or Red Hood fanart that will support all this weight.